Okay, we're live, Dax. We're live. Hey, yeah. Okay. Yes, buddy. I just want to say, firstly, so much thanks for coming on and doing this. So I mentioned to you when I first messaged you that I started this podcast back in February. I'd sort of procrastinated on it, like we all do on our projects, like our entrepreneurial things the things that we most want to do. We procrastinating on them the most generally, don't we? And I've probably put this off for about a year or two. I think the thing is, we're doing something like a podcast, a bit like any project. You feel like you need to get to a certain amount of validation before you can do it. And I just in the end, I got so frustrated. I was like, just talk to some people. Like, Matt, you've been talking to people for years, but I did this thing where I wrote down all the things that I'd like to get out of it, and one of them was to talk to the most interesting people that have inspired me the most and sort of shaped my own life. And number one on the list was yourself, my man.
Thank you.
So yeah, after 50 episodes, I felt like I earned my crust to ask for the date.
That's really kind of you to say. I'm really looking forward to seeing where we end up. As you know, people often say to me before I do quite a few podcasts, and people often say to me, "Oh, do you want to know what the questions are? Do you want to know where we're going with it and all the rest?" And I pretty much always say no. Unless it's going to be a podcast where somebody is digging into one specific area and wants to go really, really deep. Sometimes I think, yeah, I'd like a little bit of thought time around that. But usually I don't know where a podcast is going to go, what the questions are, and where it's going to end up, or what mad ramblings are going to come out of my mouth during the conversation. And to be honest, it's what keeps me inspired and motivated, because otherwise it starts to feel like a little bit of a canned process. It's the same thing that you said to the last 10 people on the last 10 episodes and stuff. So I'm looking forward to just seeing where you take us.
Well, I've got an array of questions from all around, so we'll probably do a few detours and get lost along the way, mate. But well, firstly, there was a post that you put out not that long ago, and that was what sparked my interest. I thought, you know what, it's time to talk to Dax. And the post was around what's going on in the world right now, all this craziness, and it wasn't a political post. I know you stay away from those, but it was around how we as humans are controlling our emotions, and it was really just about how we can be quite reactive and really losing relationships and allowing what's going on in the world to affect ourselves. And I thought, God, from a brain science point of view, and we'll get into all of that, but from a brain science point of view, I thought, what an interesting thing to kind of meditate on. And will people regret losing certain relationships over maybe stupid political issues, or should I wear a mask or should I not wear a mask? And well, firstly, for anyone listening who doesn't kind of doesn't know where Dax come from, we can go into all that. But for me, when I said to you earlier, like one of the most impactful people was yourself, it really stemmed from MindMap. Your course MindMap. I did Body Map, but MindMap really was a game changer for me, because it made me, number one, realize this message that we've kind of been taught from mass media on just do it, work harder, stop being such a loser, you just need to pick yourself back up. A lot of that was bullshit. Yes, it has its place, but it can also actually be quite detrimental, and it can actually push people further down into feeling like they are more of a loser. And one of the things that you teach on MindMap is the 3 types of threat and how they show up, and whether it's too fast, too slow, unclear intent. I just want to get your view, really, Dax, on what type of threat is showing up that's causing people to be so reactive, and what can we do to better calm that down?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Exactly as you said, so many people, that the general consensus around motivational psychology, and bear in mind that motivational psychology if we take away the actual true people who are qualified and really knowledgeable about it, the rest of us kind of have a tendency to think of motivational psychology as some variant of make yourself feel a bit better, to lift yourself up by your bootstraps and just bloody do it, exactly as you just said, right? And there is a place for that. There is a real place for sometimes there's nothing really holding you back and there's nothing really stopping. It's a bit like you said with the podcast, right? It's not like there was a gunman in your house saying to you, you can't run this podcast, or I'll put a bullet in your head, right? It's kind of, you know, sometimes it is just a case of just bloody do it. But a lot of the time it isn't. And a lot of time there's a lot more going on in, I was just about to say in our minds, and it might be true that it's in our minds, but often I make a distinction between our mindset and our brain set. And a lot of attention has been paid to mindset, which kind of, mindset just kind of feels like this. If you want it badly enough, you'll do it. If, you know, kind of be willing to pay the price. These are all things that I taught. You know, I'm an author of a very, very well-selling goal achievement program called the Magic 100. And within that, I was saying a lot of this stuff. And it's caused me to kind of question over the years, like, well, is that true? And like, was I leading people up a bad path with that? And what I realized was, no, it's actually true for the percentage of people that aren't deep in a threat brain at the moment, that aren't kind of experiencing, you know, they might be experiencing some hardships and some challenges, but they're not truly in threat. They're just in a place they don't want to be. And if you're not truly in threat, get up off your ass and go and do something is actually pretty good advice. Just do something. And then once the ball is in play, kind of see where you have to kick it to next. That can be really, really good advice. But for times like now, where we've got, you know, genuinely the world is in threat. I mean, at the beginning of this year, people were like beating each other up in supermarkets over toilet paper and wondering whether, you know, like everybody else, was stacking up on extra food and all of that kind of stuff. Because I didn't know the extent to what this kind of, you know, was this going to turn into like a zombie apocalypse, you know, kind of, you know, what extent was it going to be? Was it going to be people dropping dead in the street and blood coming out their eyes and ears and nose and all that kind of stuff? So
it kind of felt like that might happen, didn't it?
Yeah. and so it's natural when we're being bombarded with a lot of information in a short amount of time, which has the potential to really powerfully and negatively impact us, for fear to be there. That, in fact, that's the purpose of fear. The purpose of fear is to have us take the appropriate action to pull ourselves back out of the fear. That is the purpose of it. Like, there's a neurological basis for it. You see a snake, you judder, you jump, you scream, right? You notify everybody else in your there's a snake, right? You get the shivers for a second, and your heart and lungs are really going. It has a purpose, which was to mobilize you into an action that took you away from the threat. So when we first experienced that, that's completely natural. What most people are now experiencing, though, is not. I use the term threat, but the threat can be divided into two aspects. You've got fear, which is nearly always useful if it's actually in the moment. And you know that you're experiencing fear because it happens right now. It creates some real physiological changes, like your heart is beating, your breathing rate goes up, you start to maybe sweat, you get tunnel vision, all of these aspects. That's fear. What most of us are experiencing, though, is not fear anymore. We're experiencing anxiety. And anxiety is very, very different. It's much more pernicious and insidious, and actually far more damaging to us to live with constant anxiety. And that anxiety is based upon the same causes of fear, but being misapplied, you could say. And it's usually to do with, because the brain is basically a pattern recognition machine. It uses those patterns to create predictions. It uses those predictions to create responses. It uses those responses to either move us towards something that we really want or move us away from something that we don't want, right? And so what's happening with a lot of people right now is that we're getting caught up in anxiety, which is making constantly negative predictions about the outcomes of our actions. Constantly negative predictions, right? What if that happens? So it's a bit like, you know, kind of, you know.
Dax, can we get almost a bit addicted to that emotion? Can that almost become like, not an addiction like sugar or smoking, but it almost like hormonally maybe, you know, your people are getting conditioned to that?
Yes, you can. And the short answer is yes. It's not an addiction in the truest sense of addiction, but the reason it happens is to do with a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the heart of what you could say our mammalian center of the brain. It's all about connection and hierarchy, right? The first thing that part of your brain wants is to say, who am I connected to? Who are all my important people? Right, great, I've got connection now. The next thing it says, once it's abundant in connection, then it starts to seek out hierarchy. It says, well, who am I more important to? Or who am I more important than? Right? And so it's kind of looking at kind of connection and hierarchy.
Interesting one. Yeah.
When we lean into our anxieties and we bond with other people over those anxieties. Oh, I'm feeling really scared today about this. I don't know where it's going. Well, you think, oh yeah, that kind of, have you seen this thing? They're going to try and make us all take the injection, and they're going to force us, and they're right now the conspiracy theories and all this kind of. I'm not, regardless of which part of the spectrum anybody listening, I'm not putting any of that down. What I'm talking about is how we connect in our anxieties, and we gather more information. The more information of like-minded hearts and souls and minds that we meet with, the more that feeds into that. Like, they are absolutely, definitely trying to slip some kind of nanotechnology into our injections, and they're going to mind control us with these things, right? That's just one extreme example, but it could be anything. This lockdown is like, how dare they force us to wear masks? Or you know, kind of this conversation started over that post, which it wasn't a political post, but I was talking about how politics is kind of doing. Well, it's this tribalness.
It was quite polarizing, though, wasn't it? I read some of the comments, and you had a real 50-50 almost polarization, which is pretty much the same with everything at the moment. It seems like everything's very, very polarized, and that creates problems. And
this is largely the reason we polarize so quickly, is because particularly when we're in threat, we don't lean into information, we lean into identity, right? So what happens is, as something is happening, we kind of draw back into ourselves. Who am I? What do I already believe? Right? I already believe this. Therefore, you come along with that new piece of information. Bullshit. Not listen to that. And you go, no, look, here's 20 studies that are all saying the same thing. No, but you don't know who those studies were written by and who they were paid by and who was sponsoring that in the background, right? And so the information that comes to us is irrelevant. In fact, the information becomes a threat because we lean solidly into our identity, and we coalesce and congregate with as many people who share as many facets of our identity as we possibly can. And this is how polarity starts, right?
Yeah. That lends into another post you did on truth as well, right?
Right.
Is talking about, well, I've got my truth, and I think that we should speak our truth as long as your truth doesn't go against my truth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and people are like this. If you stop 100 people in the street and you say, should we all have freedom of speech? 100 people say yes. And you say, well, what do you believe in? And they tell you, and you say, right, you believe this, I believe something in opposition to that. Am I still allowed to say that? No, you're offensive. You're threatening me. You're not allowed to say it, right? So again, think about what's really happening here. We're entrenching into our identities, and when you see people entrench into their identities, they may not admit it. They might say, "I'm not scared of you. I'm not threatened by anything that's going on here. I'm just sticking up for my rights," right? But when you entrench into identity and you disallow information. When you disallow information, it's not usually because you're consciously trying to do it. It's because there are parts of your brain that basically won't accept new information right now. Right? They're just like, no, because that actually the new information that you're bringing is actually a threat to who I actually see myself as being. And I need to be solid in these really uncertain times. And this is what we all do. The more uncertain things are out there, the more we entrench into the handful of certainties we have. Whether that be God, whether that be relationships, whether that be our work identity, whether that be our religion, whether that be, kind of our nationalism or whatever it happens to be. But we'll entrench into identity until all the shit is over again. And once all the shit is over, we'll look back and we'll then we'll go back on some. It seems like we're hypocrites because we'll start to then explore things that we were 6 months ago, absolutely not. Anyone who says that, anyone who does that, anyone who believes that is disgusting. 6 months from now, all of this has gone away. And it's just like, well, actually, no. I mean, you've got to entertain some of these ideas and you've got to open up to that. And it's because we don't just live in one brain, right? We live in several aspects of brain. And each brain, you could say, has a different set of requirements, a different set of things that are not just important to it, but are vital to it. And most of what we're trying to accomplish when we're pursuing goals and when we're kind of dreaming of the house on the hill and what life could be and kumbaya and wouldn't it be great if we all lived in peace and all that, those are really the concerns of what you could say the human brain, the true human brain, which is all about forward thinking, artisticness, creativity, making things that don't currently exist or joining dots in new ways. And when we're in our human brain, all of that is available to us, and we can see, do you know what, Matt, I don't really agree with what you just said, but I agree with your right to say it. You go ahead, mate. It's fine. We don't have to agree on this. When I'm under threat and I can't get into my human brain in the first place, it's like, you're the spawn of Satan and how dare you. And whilst I believe in freedom of speech, I believe someone should put a bullet through your brain for saying what you just said. You're disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? We're not just one person inside here. We're kind of, the triune brain theory talks about us being three: the reptile, the mammal, and the human. But actually, it goes way beyond that. There are different modules in the brain, you could say, and that are really environmentally specific, and they're based upon what is going on right now. And this is why we're all kind of, to a degree, schizophrenic hypocrites, right?
What is your advice then, Dax? If you've got, let's say you do have someone that, maybe even with their own spouse or their best friend, and they've got very differing views. I mean, I'm hearing this a lot, to be honest, is, people, there's so many different hot topics right now, whether it's misinformation, whether it's freedom of speech, whether it's vaccines, whether it's masks, and everyone has sort of very strong views. But at the same time, relationships have got to be worth something, and, maintaining those relationships whilst also maybe you have lent, like you said, people aren't lending into information, but maybe you have, and maybe you've done your research and you're feeling very strongly about something, but someone close to you is got a very different idea. How do they work around that?
There's two aspects in many respects. I mean, there's a lot more than two, but there's two aspects that I tend to focus on. And the first aspect is, it's the source of all kinds of transformation in life, right? The source of all transformation is not what most people think it is. It's not about wanting something bigger and better and all the rest of it. The source of all transformation is doubt, right? You are who you are today because of the things you are currently certain about. And from that pool of certainty, you'll explore out into other areas that you've got little doubts about, but you'll only go as far as you feel safe. It's a bit like when you're young and you very first start playing out, you're not more than 10 yards from your street door, and you kind of, you just make, by the time you've been doing it for a while, you're hundreds of meters away, and after you've been doing it for a while longer, your parents can't even bloody find you and they're chasing you down, right? And we're kind of like the same. We start with what's certain, and then we explore out into other areas. Now, as I've already said, when we're under threat, we tend not to explore. We just entrench into the certainty. It's the equivalent of staying behind the four walls of your house. You're the little scared kid who won't go out to play because you're worried of what might happen, and the traffic and the bullies and the weather and the spiders and the bugs and the dogs and everything else, right? And you just go, well, just lock myself in my house and play with my Lego in here. So when it comes to the first stage is really, first off, well, let me flip it. Start with the certainty. Meet other people in their certainty and see where your certainty matches. That's the first thing, right? So if I meet you in your certainty, I am certain, even though I don't know you personally really deeply and all the rest of it, I'm certain that there are people in your life that you love, that you want to make sure stay safe and well and happy and all the rest of it. And there are people in my life that I love, that I want to make sure are safe and happy and well and all the rest of it, right? That you have strongly held beliefs about a certain thing, and I probably share the same beliefs, right? So most of us share the same principles: freedom of speech, kindness, care, love, all of this kind of stuff. So meet people in that, and then you start from the certainty and you build out and say, well, this is how I show my love to my people. How do you show your love to your people, Matt? All right, but we both show love, right? We both agree that. This is how I show care to the people that are important in my life. How do you show, Matt? But meet people in that. Like, don't spend as much time looking at where you're different. Spend more time looking at where you're the same.
Yeah, I think along with that, I mean, ultimately, the polarization almost forces us to try and be better communicators, doesn't it? It's like,
right.
and it seems like lost each other then. It seems like we have lost the art a little bit of agreeing to disagree as well. Like, I don't know whether that's been exacerbated by social media because it's such a short, snappy, something like this is good because we can have a proper conversation about something. And with social media, sometimes you could put that, like the post you put out, and that could come off slightly. If you've got the person in threat that day and they've just come home and they're in like that space of threat and they read that post about, and they're like, that's it, bam, their reptilian kicks off. It
even happens with people that we know intimately, right? I sent a message to my son the other day. He read it. He took it completely out of context of what I said. And this is someone who knows me, likes me, loves me, trusts me, believes in me, knows usually what I intend. But he was in a bit of a dark place with something that was going on. He read it in a completely different way. So take that and multiply that by 1,000 to strangers who've never met you, don't know anything about you. Yeah. Right? Absolutely, right? So, yeah, I mean, you brought up social media. Yes, social media does exacerbate this. We're effectively the human brain was really designed in terms of the ACC and that kind of the anterior cingulate cortex and that mammalian aspect. From everything we've been able to kind of come to understand about it through neuroscience, it is best formulated for groups of between 25 and 100. Right, 25 and 100. Like we can keep track of those connections, and we can learn enough about nuance of communication. And when Mary raises her eyebrow in a certain way, she's thinking, "What an idiot!" And when John kind of crosses his arms, he's right. Like we're able to keep control or keep track of all the nuance of communication. But it's also big enough that we understand that the person that we're communicating with has also got the ability to keep track of the nuance of ours. In other words, we don't spend a lot of time, he meant this and she meant that, and he said this, but he really must have meant it. We don't spend a lot of time doubting each other. When you start to communicate with much wider audiences, and those wider audiences are in threat and they've become polarized, it's not just doubt that we're experiencing judgment and criticism, right? Polarity is nearly always a good thing. Polarity makes us think outside the box and say, was there a better way I could have done that? And could I have done this? And should I have, right? But once we're on the receiving end of doubt and criticism, you've got to understand that when somebody is in attack, criticism and judgment, right? When kind of somebody is attacking you with criticism and judgment, they're no longer communicating with you. Now that's dialogue has disappeared. We're now in diatribe. We're in kind of we're in attack mode, and what we will do in every case is fight, flight, or freeze. We'll just go, I'm getting out of this conversation and leave. We'll make an apology that we don't really mean. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to offend anybody. I'm going, right? Right. We'll fight back, and we'll start to say, no, screw you and your opinion and everything that you stand for.
Yeah, and I suppose with social media, we're still really in its infancy. I know it's been around 10, 15 years, but compared to speech and talking to people, we don't really know what the rules are, do we? Like, right. If you're speaking to someone in person, in the past, it's pretty obvious. You have an argument. Sometimes it ends up in a fight. That's pretty much the end outcomes. With social media, that there's less like rules on what's right, what's wrong. I mean, people will say some horrific things to people that they would never say in real life because they know what would happen in real life. Yeah, and the outcomes.
Well, I mean, Jordan Peterson makes the really great point that kind of a lot of things that keep things civil between men in real life is the threat of violence. And a lot of people frown upon that and they go, "Oh, we shouldn't have to come down to that." But actually, no, it's a useful tool. If you thought, if I was to say this to Matt right now, Matt would kind of turn around and punch me in the face, and I don't want to be punched in the face. Therefore, I'm not going to say that. It makes me think about how I communicate with you. When we all jump on social media, and particularly when the people we surround, like I often use the word tribe, right? But when our tribe turns into a pack, in other words, when our tribe becomes predatory and they are attacking everything that's not them, and everybody is wrong and they are right. And if we actually stay included in the pack at that time, we're going to behave like the pack because that's what packs do. Packs conform. And as much as even if you were out on the street, if you were walking down the street and you were a bunch of friends and suddenly somebody comes running out of an alleyway and knocks one of your friends to the ground and starts kicking the crap out of them, even without you knowing the intention, what caused this or anything, you'd probably dive on that person. And even if you didn't kick the crap out of them, you dive on that person and get involved, right? Because you go, well, I don't know what this is about, and I don't know what this started over, but you're not part of my pack, therefore I'm defending my pack. And social media creates packs. It doesn't. We'd like to think that kind of good social media will create tribes. It really, in many respects, it hasn't. It's created packs. They're wolf packs. And we're looking for people that think the same as us. And very often we're borrowing from what seems to be other people's courage, right? Now kind of going, well, this person is really loud, really vocal, really in your face. I wouldn't normally do that, but because they're doing it, I'll jump on their thread and I'll go, yeah, Dax, you're right there. You know, kick them to the curb, right? And we wouldn't.
Yeah, you see that all the time.
Right. We wouldn't normally do that. And it comes from being in threat. When we're in threat, we regress out of our human brain and we start to become far more mammalian. And if we're not careful, like a mammalian brain in threat will act like a pack. A mammalian brain in out of threat will act more like a tribe. It'll go, kind of, these are my people, and this is where I belong, and I love these guys. And that's the difference, right? When you're not in threat, your pack are the people you love, right? When you are in threat, your pack combine solely to destroy people you hate. That's the distinction. Right? A lot of people that are in those packs at the moment on social media, they don't love each other. They don't have a lot of respect for each other. Many of them don't even know each other, right?
Yeah.
But they'll go out as a pack and they'll rip the throats out of everybody else, because basically their community is based upon the hatred of other people as opposed to the love of themselves and the love of each other.
Do you think with time, I said like we're still really in the infancy. Do you think we'll get better then? Do you think we'll get better at learning how to communicate?
I'd
online?
like to think we would, but I don't know. I don't really know the mechanism by which that will take place, because I was about to say no one's policing it, right? But the trouble is, those that are policing it unilaterally. Like, if you're for any of these things, and I'm not saying whether they're right or wrong, but if you're for animals, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter, left, kind of Democrat, like the list goes on. If you're for these things, you can say and do almost anything, and we'll let you, and there'll be no real hard policing on you. If you're for any of the things that, not necessarily even in opposition, but if you say something that somebody in one of those groups gets offended by, then we're going to police you, shut you down, demonetize you, take away your page, take away your account, right? And so when you've got this unilateral policing, just like we're all up in arms about kind of, the heavy-handed policing, not just against black people around the world, but we're seeing it against heavy-handed policing against the masks and everything else that's going on at the moment. If all you have is policing in one direction and it's always heavy-handed, then you're gonna create even more polarity, and you're gonna create more of a divide where people, when they do come together, they only come together to shoot and scoot, to say what they most want to say, and not really listen to the other side. Like, social media is only really going to work long term. I'm sure these platforms will be around for a very, very long time. But if we're talking about it as social media, the word social in there, it's only really going to work long term if we can get back to some communication that actually is truly dialogue as opposed to diatribe and kind of destruction. Because that's and that's how you're involved in dialogue as well. Dialogue is you're truly curious and you want to learn. I may never agree with you on some topics, but I'm always curious about. I wonder what brought Matt to believe that, like, and without the need to feel that I have to change your mind, but just I wonder why. Because everything that you believe, you don't believe it arbitrarily, or most of what you believe, you don't believe arbitrarily. Sometimes a new factoid comes along, it sounds better than what we've heard before, and we go, oh, I'll kind of try that on, see how it fits. But most of it, experience, a large amount of it is indoctrination. Some of it is experience, some of it's observation, some of it's exploration, where we dig in a little bit and go, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if what I'm saying to the world at the moment is actually true. And I don't think there are enough people saying that at the moment, because what they've got is enough people behind them in their pack that is encouraging them to say, fuck it, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Just we're saying it is, and let's go and rip the throats out of everybody who says.
I must admit, I struggle with that a little bit, because I feel like I'm extremely open-minded. So I'll look at their view, left or right or whatever, and just look at all of the information for what it is, and make my own observations and thought processes based on that. But it kind of gets me. I find it hard to comprehend, actually, like how other people can be so black and white with their views. Like, this must be the way. And I'm like, well, you need to look at history to look at some of the things that we thought to be true to then not be true, to know that actually, well, you know from being a massive studier of information, like the more you learn and the more you know, the more you realize you actually don't know.
Yeah.
we know nothing to some extent. And
but the process of mastery is actually learning everything that you don't know, which is a huge and extensive list.
Yeah. So I want to go just to digress a little bit on you, Dax, because so for people that I'm just introducing them to Dax Moy. I've spoke to you many times for our members and many people in the past, but how long ago was it now that you was running your high-end gym personal training studio?
I closed it 3 years ago, but I ran it for 17 years.
17 years. So this was in London, high-end studio. You sort of known at the time. I mean, you were one of the first internet fitness gurus to the coaches that I came across, along with the likes of Paul Check and Steve Jack, Paul Moore, and the Bedros, and that was how I first come across you. But what I wanted to know, since you've closed, I actually asked a couple of PT friends, like, what would you ask Dax? And they were like, well, what's he been up to? Where's he been since he closed? What's he been up to the last few years? I know you've been on your adventures. Is that one of the key things that you've been sort of doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a story behind why it closed as well, and so I've been doing it for quite some time, and obviously about eight years ago now, as you know, your readers probably, or your listeners probably won't, but I was in the tsunami, and I was kind of involved quite heavily in that. I was carrying bodies around and resuscitating people and holding bits and pieces of body together and stuff like that. So I was deeply involved with that, and I want to say I got over it, right, kind of fairly quickly. Like I was shook up while I was there, and had all the experiences, but I kind of got over, like, life just carried on for me when I got back, really. And then about 8 years ago, I started getting these. I was driving down the motorway, and I got this massive flashback, and the flashback was as if it was like right there. It was like a body landed on the bonnet of my Land Rover as I'm driving down the M11, and
wow.
And then I started to get these really regular flashbacks and smells and sounds, and I basically at the height of it, I went 18 months on sleeping about 3 hours per night. I couldn't stay asleep, and then I'd drop off, and I was an emotional wreck at that time. And I was able to still function at work, like in terms of look after my clients, but I wasn't really functioning very well as a business operator anymore. I wasn't able to pay attention to my staff. I wasn't able to pay attention to the marketing and all that kind of stuff. So all I wanted to do was come in, speak to my one-to-one clients, do my work, and basically jump in the car and go home again, and usually it's staring at the wall for hours or bursting into tears over stuff. That's literally what's happening to me. And kind of that was where MindMap was born, actually, during that period.
Oh, wow.
I looked into positive psychology, and I was doing my mantras and my meditations and everything else, and it worked to a degree. And then some days I'd still wake up and basically stay in my pajamas all day, staring at the wall, bursting into tears, having flashbacks, like a true emotional wreck. And I was like, the way I've solved nearly everything in my life is, first off, admit that there's something that I don't know or don't understand about a thing, and then go out of my way to do my best to understand it. And so I got away from positive psychology and general motivational stuff and started looking into, well, okay, this seems to be a brain issue then. So what's going on in my brain? Well, first off, I started off in mind. I went all Freudian and kind of all that kind of stuff and looked into that. And that was only so helpful. And then when I started to look at neuroscience and it's saying, well, these brain centers are trying to do this and they're trying to tell you that, and they're kind of these things, they need, you know, too fast, too slow, unclear intent. This is the source of threat. These are the different brain zones that are in operation when you're feeling a certain way or when you can or can't concentrate. So I put all my effort and energy into that. And it really worked. Like it was like night and day. And it didn't take away the whole problem, but I would say probably almost overnight, you know, I say almost overnight. It took me a few months to study this stuff, but kind of once I embedded it, started using it, I came down to the point where I was only about 50% affected. And that's where I started building out the MindMap courses and started teaching.
50% is still a lot compared to...
It was beating basically every drug or medical intervention at the time for PTSD. It was beating all of that, like hands down. And the further I got into this work, into this exploration of neuroscience, the better it's gotten over time. So and now I'm at the point where I still have challenges with what you could call hypervigilance. I'm a bit too switched on at times, a bit too thinky. Like I can lay in bed and not go to sleep for hours, but I do sleep a lot more than I did back then. You know, kind of most things are kind of going pretty well. But anyway, so I kind of ran my business into the ground a bit at that time. I had plenty of staff and they were doing a good job, but my desire for looking after everyone else, other than showing up for my clients and kind of looking after them, my desire for making sure there are enough clients coming into a business and making sure there are enough people to look after them and monitoring the quality of the trainers and coaches standards and all that, I just really didn't have the interest anymore. I didn't have the brain power to share with them as well as keep myself healthy at the time. And so I kind of backed off from running the studio and put a lot more effort into building out the courses and the seminars, because they were high impact and high intensity, in that maybe 2 or 3 days I'd have a bunch of people in a room, but then I might not have to do that kind of work again for 3 months before I run my next course. Or I'd be running my retreats and I'd go away for 10 days at a time with my students in Thailand on retreats. Very, very high intensity, very high impact, but then I only do a few of those per year. And so I put my kind of efforts into what was good for me. And in fact, it's directly in teaching with what I teach all my students and my clients, which is to make yourself the center of your universe. And most of us don't. Most of us soldier on and plod on, and we're like, yeah, but I've got a family to look after, and I've got to put the kids first, and I've got to put my wife first, and I've got to put my clients first, and I've got to put my staff first, and the business first, and all this kind of stuff. And this is why people generally tend to keep plodding on. You know, I did for the first phase of this. So I was just working through the PTSD. I'm like, well, it'll go away eventually. And it didn't. I was making it work because everything else in the world was actually more important than me looking after myself. And when I flipped it and I said, no, Dax Moy, you're the center of your universe, because everything else in the orbit around you needs you to be steady. Right? If you want to be a great husband, and if you want to be a great father, and if you want to kind of have a great impact upon all these different people, you have to have the prediction and the response about yourself and your own life in order to be able to show up and give those things to other people. And as soon as I did that, and I kind of leaning heavily on the neuroscience to do that, life changed for me again dramatically. And to be honest, it's weird now. This year's a bit different. I mean, I've still earned very good money this year by most people's standards. Thank you. Thank you, God. But you know, it's a lot less than I earned, like, let's say, last year and the year before. But that's just world circumstances and the rest. But I'm earning a lot more money than I ever did when I was getting up at 5 a.m., driving into London, working with clients, running a team.
Yeah, I think just sorry to interrupt. One of the other light bulbs for me with MindMap actually is, you know, in what you just said, is like that understanding. I think it hit me when, you know, because I work with lots of people like you have done, and you realize that actually people, because of the certainty that they have in themselves, that they get, even if the life isn't great, and like you said, they're just plodding along, I realize that actually a lot of people, because they're still getting that certainty that they know what to expect, they know what their expectations are, that they're willing to struggle on and kind of be in a certain level of pain, than make the jump to take action on their health, to take action on their career, because because that's going to be like another level. And it's kind of, that was something that I was like, wow, that's so when you understand it from a brain science point of view, it makes it easier in a way. I think a lot like a knowledge in general does, doesn't it? If you've got the knowledge and you understand what's going on, you can make changes easier. You can build the courage, maybe, to.
And this is why I say, you'll remember this from MindMap, where I talk about there's no such thing as self-sabotage, right? People have this tendency to kind of think, oh, I've sabotaged myself again. I've done sabotage. I come from a military background, and sabotage is defined as the deliberate and willful destruction of an opportunity target, right? So deliberate and willful being the most important part there. Most people aren't deliberately and willfully holding themselves back, but the way their brain is operating, what they're actually doing is they're saying, I have, even within all the pain and the frustration and the anxiety that I feel with these things over here, I still have certainty, for example, that $2,000 is going to hit my bank account every month. I still have certainty that the mortgage is going to be paid. I still have certainty. So if I was to switch up and go and do something else, I lose that certainty. And at the moment, that uncertainty is more painful than the pain I'm currently experiencing. Right. And that's really what it comes down to. No one's self-sabotaging. No one, there's a very small percentage of people that are, but they generally tend to have mental health issues and, like people that self-harm and stuff like that. But right. That's a form of self-sabotage, deliberately and willfully destroying part of yourself. But most people aren't. Most people aren't self-sabotaging. Most people are caught in a trap of pursuing the certain, even if the certain is actually the cause of their pain.
And one of your key strategies that I've spoken to members about time and time again, that I've used myself, is the concept of air. So adding attention, intention, repetition. One of my questions somewhere, I haven't really looked at them yet, but is how, I'm curious, like Dax. So air. How do you have any like strategies that you use to create more air in your life so you can get more attention, intention, and to create the repetition?
Yes. The short answer is yes, and it usually comes down to having some kind of a ritual. So like daily having a ritual. So every single day I read something for entertainment. Like novels and stuff. At the moment, I'm reading load of zombie apocalypse stuff at the moment. But I read a lot of fantasy and like wizards and elves and all that kind of stuff. So actually, entertainment type of reading every single day. What I found is that actually being an entertainment reader has made me a really great writer. So I'm really good linguistically and in written form. I can write really, really well. I don't say that from any conceit or arrogance, but I write very, very well. But it's because I read non-work stuff.
Right. Okay.
When you hear a story being told really, really well over and over again, and you're reading like I do, I read well over 100 books per year every year, and have done for the last 20 odd years of my life. That really does help you with language, but actually. See, a big part of our sticking points in ourselves, like how we get trapped into certain ways of thinking, we get trapped linguistically. We only have a certain amount of words, and and so basically, it's the equivalent of saying, let's say you've got a fairly small vocabulary, and your thing is you just say feeling pissed off today, right? Pissed off. Your brain accesses that. Well, what does pissed off mean? It means you're kind of angry, kind of annoyed, kind of upset. But whereas when you can granulate that and you can break that down, and so like if I specifically mean a thing when I say pissed off, but another time I say I'm feeling a bit despondent, another time I'm saying I'm feeling a bit low. And you start to use different words. Your brain starts to ask you questions. So what do you mean when you say that? And then as your vocabulary widens, your sense of self deepens. You have more ways to describe who you are and what you're going through and your experiences.
Yeah, so I like that. Yeah.
That's why we start to get into I am feeling bad today, but not as bad as.
When did you start reading more fiction, Dax?
Oh, I always have. I think
Okay.
I first read Lord of the Rings, I think, when I was like 8.
Right.
and that the entire book.
So you would really attribute a lot of your content and your writing around like being really into fiction.
Yeah, being fiction, fantasy, kind of, at the
a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs like myself tend to stick with the non-fiction, and I've delved into fiction, but I do struggle with it. I do struggle to kind of get into it, and
So I read. If you look around here, this is a stack that runs from floor to ceiling. Another stack over here, right? I read so like a hell of a lot, but what I found was when you read only business or only entrepreneurialism, what it does is it has a tendency at times to put you into the first off, I'm behind, so I need to speed up. So it very often will cause you to it will cause you to add uncertainty where you were certain, but in an unskillful way. You go, to our emails. Maybe we should start doing this in the business. It's sometimes a good thing, but other times it's not. Other times, like if it's one of the big kind of things that I've come to understand, which ties into AIR and everything else that we're speaking about here, is that if you don't have a process, you are unlikely to experience success, right? And so what happens when you read a lot of business type books and entrepreneurial type books, you just try and slot them into your process somewhere and effectively screw up a perfectly good functioning process. And unless you're going to go, let me take that piece and take this piece out of my business temporarily and slot this one in and then have a look. But I keep 99% of my business the same, but put this one new thing in and see if it works better or worse. And we keep doing that, and we keep slotting in and finding out what's better. That's a process. But what a lot of entrepreneurial reading does is it just hits you up with what I call brain farts, right? And it persuades you to take action in a very unsystematic way.
Yeah, I think that's potentially one of the biggest challenges, maybe new trainers coming into the industry or coaches. I mean, when I first came online, I think there was yourself, like I said, and maybe Paul Check, I still follow, and a few others, but it was kind of hard to find any decent information. There was a couple of YouTube videos out there, but now, there's just so much information, so many books written, so many coaches teaching coaches and mentorships and courses. And I feel almost quite lucky or grateful that, I've sort of come from an era where, I understand that, like you said, that the importance of having some processes. But even now, I easily, like most people, get distracted. You go on a rabbit hole with YouTube or whatever. But I don't know. Do you agree? Like with new coaches coming into the industry, I certainly want to get your take on coaching. But having focus and having a clear plan and being able to actually, choose something and to stick with it. That is a massive skill in itself, right?
Mastery is the process of choosing the same thing over and over again, right? That's it's saying, like, and really, like, when you think about it, like, a lot of people put their emphasis on what they want to do, and of course you don't know what you're going to want to do 5 years from now. Like when I was younger, I knew I wanted to be a paratrooper. I joined paras, and then I kind of wanted to go commando, became commando. Then I wanted to go into a different type of regiment. But if you'd have asked me when I was like 16 years old, like, what you're going to be, I knew I was going to be a soldier for the rest of my life. And then somehow I became a personal trainer, and somehow I became a coach, and somehow I became an educator and working in neuroscience. And none of these things were on the cards at the time. They weren't even on my radar. And so very often people get hypnotized by what they say they want to do. The real question is, who do you want to be? Like, how do you want to experience yourself? And make sure that the things that you're doing support who you want to be. How do you want to know yourself, Matt? Like, as you're stepping through the days of your life, how do you want to know yourself? Like, when you look you wake up every morning and you look in the mirror, who is the man you want to see? And right now, and for the last like 20 years or whatever, that man has been associated with personal training, but that might not always be the case. About 3 years from now, you might go, actually, I've got a much better idea. But it should always be in support of the man that you want to be, not the thing that the man might want to do today. Because to that, it's a bit like with food. Like, today you fancy spaghetti, but tomorrow you might fancy something completely different.
Yeah.
Not to get too tied down into doing. And, you know, I know it sounds like very metaphysical and stuff, and it's, you know, a lot of people go down the airy fairy arty farty route with all this kind of stuff, but I mean it in a very kind of logical and systematic way. Like we end up having what we have because of what we've done, and we end up doing what we do because of who we are, right? And so kind of making sure that we don't forget that, and we don't flip and reverse that equation and start to say, well, what is it that I want? And we just go and become someone else, doing all kinds of shit we don't really want to do in ways we don't really, and we're out of resonance and out of integrity with ourselves, and we're writing certain kinds of posts, and we're doing certain kinds of videos, we're making certain kinds of offers, and then we're going, yeah, I mean, you know, oh, you know this because you've been around my stuff for a long time, but one of the posts or one of the repetitive things that come up in the content that I put out is about coaches saying, you know, I'm creating content for people that don't really seem to resonate, that I'm putting out offers for stuff. I don't really want to do those offers, but some marketing guys told me I should because that's the only way I'll make a sale. In other words, what a lot of people are experiencing is living out of integrity with themselves. You're not being who you want to be. And so a big part of this AIR, this ties into everything we're talking about here, because part of that ritual on a daily basis, some of it is reading non-work stuff, but every day I'll read work stuff as well. On top of that, every day I'll read research that's kind of new to my areas of specialization. So I'll read, in an average month, I'll probably read about 50 or 60 research papers per month. I normally read about 2 or 3 a day, but then I might go a few days without it, right? And then I'll also, with every single piece of that on a daily basis, I will go and look at conversations from people that hold an opposing worldview to me on that topic. What's this guy saying? And then instead of being defensive because he's saying something else, I'll measure what's being said against what I already know of the topic. And I'll honestly then say, here's where I agree with him, but here's what doesn't make sense to me. And if what's being told to me is a better story than my story, I'll adopt it. And if it's what's being told doesn't make as much sense, then I'll let it go. But that's a daily process. On top of that,
how do you just make that decision, like with your consumption of information? Like, how do you decide, well, this is the type of research that I want to go down that rabbit hole now? Like, how do you make, because you know, once you get into that's like a time consuming thing. That's a big investment, isn't it? So whether it's mindset or nutrition or a certain area within the niche within that, how do you like decide on that?
Well, first and foremost, I'm nearly always trying to solve my own problems. Areas of life where I'm having a struggle will become my primary area of research, right? Like, oh, why am I not dialed in on this area? Or why is it that I know better, but I keep going back to that habit? I'm doing something else, right? So I'll put my emphasis into that. Nearly always, my initial research is always selfish. But then there'll be secondary research, which will be, I've been working with a client, something's come up, I've used all the coaching tools that I know to use, and there's still some resistance there as it's not breaking through. And sometimes I'll say it's just the circumstances that the client's in at the moment and don't have a huge expectations there. And other times I'll say, no, the client seemed really receptive to this, and I used the skill very well in terms of how I know how to use it. So if they were receptive and my application of the skill was good, but it still didn't bring about the result, what else might be going on? And so I'll dive into the research around that as well. So that's how I decide. Like, for me, information is not that important. The ability to implementation kicks ass of information. Like,
that's your measure of success,
right? So it may seem that I'm always in information gathering mode, but what I'm always doing is I'm comparing. If a new piece of data comes in, and I could compare that to experiences I've had, and I can immediately go, no, because I've tried that stuff before in the way they're saying it, and that's not held to be true. I can immediately release that. It doesn't mean I dismiss it, but I can release it and say, I'm not going to look down that rabbit hole for a little while. I'm going to carry on the route that I'm on. And that's really, really important. It's really important, because so many people will they consume information in a randomized way. They're never really connecting the dots. And the brain is nothing more than like seeking to make better links. You know this thing here, create a link, create a link, create a link, create a link. And I'm always looking for things that will strengthen the existing links, or that will cause enough doubt around those existing links for me to say, maybe I should get rid of that and bring something new in. So, 10 years ago, I would have been one of the guys who was saying nearly everything can be solved if you have a big enough why, if you take consistent, persistent action, if you keep a positive mindset, and if you just bloody do it, right? Yeah. Mostly 10 years ago, I would have said that 100% of stuff can be solved in that way. Now I'll say it's probably more like about 20% of things can be solved in that way.
Wow, really? That little?
Yeah.
One of my questions, and you kind of answered it earlier, but I kind of got the feeling that MindMap was one of the pivotal things that happened in your career. I don't know if I'm right or wrong on that, but I didn't realize that it was through you kind of understanding how to not overcome PTSD, but obviously you don't overcome it, but how to handle that situation better. Was there like a specific moment, Dax, when you were like, fuck, I'm onto something here. This is why have I not seen this anyway? Why am I do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, obviously, like now we're in a position where every other day, like I see a Facebook ad for someone talk about the neuroscience of coaching. But MindMap was genuinely the first one that was actually had a neuroscientific basis for the work. And at the time, I was really shocked that I was the first guy putting it together. But it's also been my experience for a lot of my life that I put things together like the Elimination Diet, which ended up being downloaded over 1 million times and being used worldwide and all the rest. And at the time when I built the Elimination Diet, I was like, why is no one else talking about doing this? And then I started with Paul Chek kind of got me into the credit where it's due, kind of the first of my work in the kinetic chain theory. But then I studied around and I brought a whole bunch of other things together, KCA 1, 2, 3, and 4, all the different programs around kinetic chain that I built. And even at that time, I was like, why is no one else talking about this? Paul Chek was, and in his own inimitable way, but like he was doing the stuff. But it was few and far between that were doing it. It was probably Paul Chek, Gary Gray Cook, a few people like that, and that was kind of it. And in the UK, I was the only one talking about it. Yeah. And I was always wondering why people weren't talking about it, because to me it just seemed so obvious. And I think one of the gifts that I have, one of the gifts I possess, and again I don't say it with conceit or arrogance or anything, it's just the truth, is I seem to have a brain that is very good at simplifying. So I can take very, very complex issues and then make them very, very simple. And so not everybody has that ability to do that. Like some people take simple issues and make them very complex, right? Yeah. I also have the ability to tell stories in quite a powerful way, which again comes back to what I was saying about reading fantasy and fiction and stuff like that. So I'm able to talk about it, and communicate what I've learned in a very simple and storified kind of way. But perhaps the most important is that one of the things that I've done with my work that most people don't seem to be, is that I've become very, very, very good at systematizing. But everything I do is taught out of a system: kinetic chain theory, nutrition and diet, train. Like my interns who came to work with me at my studio, they had a 4-year internship program that involved every lecture they were going to receive, every book they had to read, and all that kind of stuff. I've always been very systematic. And a big part of that was taught to me through the military. So the military teach you in systems. And I just adopted that and carried on doing that. And so the military drummed systems into me, as it does to every soldier. But I've been able to really embrace that and carry on with systems. But certainly kind of MindMap is definitely one of the most powerful systems I've ever created. And even to this day, like I'm making some amendments to it at the moment. I'm adding new things to it, but in order to do that, and in order to know where to slot my new pieces of information in, I'm having to sit through my own material again. And as arrogant as it might sound, I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this is brilliant. And then, we're talking about like 8 years ago when I first mapped it out, and it's all still true. It's all still functional. There's nothing there that I'd say that doesn't have a place in this course anymore. It needs to be taken out or anything like that. There are a few amendments and there are a few expansions on things, but definitely, once I realized that this was a principle-based system for really creating any form of transformation that you want, a personal transformation, a business transformation, a relationship transformation, and not least because the very first thing that it does is it gives you an explanation and understanding for what's going on, which means you can stop being your own personal threat. And this is there are two things that come back to me again and again and again out of MindMap. Number one is that the coaches that are learning it tell me that they understand themselves 10 times better than they ever have before, right?
Yeah.
And a kind of a side effect of that is that they're less judgmental, they're less critical, they're less down on themselves about stuff, because they go that they've embraced the language and they're just go, I know I'm only saying this because I'm in threat. I know I'm only saying this because my
yeah.
And that's really warming to hear, that people. I've always really thought that the ultimate test of any coaching system is not that you can go and spiel it off to your clients, but that it changes your life. And the coaches themselves have, like, literally 100% across the board, every person who's been through the program has fed back to me that it changed their own life. So that's the first, and for me, the most important part of it. And the second has been that just how easy most people have found to apply it to their clients. Like, unlike some other courses that they go on and I have to remember to make it a SMART goal, or I have to remember to do this gap thing, or I have to remember to do this other thing, or whatever. It's a very instinctive system. Like, because it's actually built in that kind of creating these neuro connections. The way I teach the course itself is taught using neuroscientific principles. So I teach MindMap using MindMap to teach MindMap.
Yeah.
Which means that it's actually it embeds and it becomes part of a person's identity rather than just some shit you learnt once before when you were on a course.
Yeah, I think I mean, definitely transformed my life, Dax, and like, I think your guru project tagline, know yourself to grow yourself. Yeah. I felt like that pretty much, which is probably why coaches find it so easy to teach, because that in itself almost just explains the whole thing. Something as complex as neuroscience. In my mind, the idea of knowing yourself better to grow yourself, it's just genius. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of very pro personal development and learning about yourself. And it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast, because I kind of wanted to encourage more of our members to be like, let's not just look at the broccoli and the chicken and the Tabata training principles. We can do all that stuff, but some of the issues that we've got going on, that they're not going to be solved long term at that level. And a lot of our members have come on board, and I've also, you're one of the people that inspired me to run my own retreats, and we've had some fantastic, meaningful conversations in Portugal, and just on a level that I never expected to be working on. Like, when I started out as a personal trainer, I was just teaching body pump and spinning. Then I started doing personal training, and then went to learn a bit more about that. And I just thought that I'd just be teaching training and nutrition. I thought that was going to be the rest of my career. And then, but like you say, you look into things a bit deeper, and I started implementing things like your elimination diet, and then that would get a set amount of results, but then there'll be people that would hate it and be like, chastising me for getting them to try it. And then you're like, well, this isn't working for everyone. So obviously there's another layer to this. And I think that's why when MindMap came out, you hit so many people at the right time, because so many trainers were feeling that frustration. I know for a fact, when I came out of that MindMap weekend and started implementing it, automatically my I had these tension levels where I had a few PT clients that I was training that I used to get really frustrated with because they just weren't implementing the stuff and they weren't really putting the work in. And then when I realized that actually your analogy in MindMap of you're somewhat you're just a signpost, you're just like a traffic warden, like, you can go this way, you can go this way, here are a few options, and I'll meet you where you're at and give you a few options, and I don't have to take the full burden of you not losing your 10 pounds of weight, and that was just ever since that's never left me. Like that's been a massive kind of release. I don't know if you've had feedback like that. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of personal trainers have historically taken on the idea that, and I think partly it's because the marketing experts tell them this, that you are responsible for your clients' results.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like, no personal trainer is responsible for their clients' results. It doesn't serve the client, and it doesn't serve the trainer to even believe that, to entertain that as an idea, right? You're a tool in a toolbox. And your job is to present the best selection of tools to get the job done, and then keep inviting the person in various ways until it's resonant with them to say, well, which tool am I going to pick up and what way am I going to go with it, right? We're not, military boot camp instructors who have our recruits stand to attention and literally follow our commands. It's not what we want, and it's not what they want. Like, no, even clients that come to you and say, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. They tell you that in one of their animal brains. They're telling you that out of desperation at the time. But as soon as they're not desperate anymore, they're like, don't tell me what to do. I want my freedom. But the first imperative, or the second imperative, you could say, first imperative is safety. The second imperative is freedom. We'll always resist anything that seems to encroach upon our freedoms. And the way a lot of personal trainers have been taught to do things and take control of their clients is actually is directly going to eventually result in conflict with the client. It's going to result in threat. And I say conflict because the client might not say to you, screw you, I'm not doing it. Some do, but some of them might just, as you say, get frustrated. But some of them, like, their version of flight is to just not show up anymore for sessions, or use the one big get out of jail free that any threatened client can use at any time, which is, I can't afford it anymore. I love you, Matt. You're awesome. You're brilliant. You're the best trainer I've ever worked with. Unfortunately, I can't afford it anymore. A lot of time, those clients have just gone into flight. They're like, I can't take showing up for training sessions anymore and feeling like I'm being judged, criticized, like I don't want it badly enough. Seeing them roll their eyes at me again and tell me that, oh, come on, Mary, if you're really serious about this, you'd get on with it, right? And so, like, I'm paying to be continuously criticized. I don't want to do that anymore. It's threatening to me, to my self-identity. Let me go into flight. Let me just base it. And what's the easiest way for me to go into flight? Just tell them I can't afford it anymore. Because that's the one thing you can't do anything about. Unless you're the kind of trainer who says, do you know what? Don't care. I'll keep training you for the next 6 months anyway. Come on. Right?
Yeah.
And most people aren't going to do that. And so, that was a big realization for myself. Watching sometimes we had really great systems at the studio, including the Elimination Diet. And in the early stages, we applied it like regimental drill instructors. We're like, no, every client has to do it and do it this way, and this is how it has to be done. And then we realized that actually some people just aren't ready for it. And so I started to adopt an approach that I've latterly come to call over the mountain, round the mountain, right? And it's basically this: like, some people get a lot of joy in taking the hardest route up the mountain. They're like, I made it to the summit in the fastest time. I climbed up the sheer rock face. I did it without crampons or any, I free climbed. Other people need ropes. Other people just want to take the hiker's trail. And other people say, do you know what? I just want to see what's on the other side of the mountain. I'm quite happy to take the long way round on that road. And as long as the person who's choosing to go around the mountain doesn't give you shit for how long it's taking, they're like, if they say, I want to go around the mountain, but I want to get to the destination as quick as I would if I went over it, then they need to be educated that you can't have it both ways. But if that person says to you, do you know what? For me right now, going over the mountain is a massive threat. And I know that I'll probably start strong, and in 30 days, I'll drop out the program altogether. But if you're okay with me just for a while taking the route around the mountain, and then occasionally I might decide to go for a bit of a sprint, a bit of an elevation to gain a couple of 100 feet. But to begin with, let's just go around the mountain. and you're like, Matt, you are aware that going around the mountain is going to take us a little bit longer to get there, but I'm still going to get you there, mate. And you're like, yeah, I'm good with that. Then isn't that a better way? And it's not taking, like, I just really want to be clear, because some people have said to me, oh, I'm just no good at all that softly shit.
Mm.
And a coach doesn't have to be softly. A coach doesn't have to be kind of listen to every, I don't believe in the word excuses really, but we don't have to listen to every sob story that a client gives us. In fact, our job is to challenge some of those stories.
Mm.
Is it really the case that you can't, or is it that you don't want to? Or like, we can challenge those things. But at the same time, we've got to remember that it's the client's journey. It's not the coach's journey. The client is going where they want to go. And like, if you were to jump into my taxi, and just because I like driving straight up the Holloway Road to take you to the Archway, if you said, oh, do you know what? There's a few places I want to stop off on the way around. Can you not go up the Holloway Road? Can you go down Caledonian Road, York Way, around the back? Go, it's your journey, mate, but you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? The client should have more of a say in their journey. And in fact, the more likely they are more likely to succeed in their journey, in arriving at a destination, if they're part of deciding the journey.
That's huge. That's huge.
MindMap helps people to do that. MindMap helps people to you take responsibility for providing the vehicle. You don't take responsibility for the overall journey. Right, so I've used different analogies there: the vehicle, the toolbox, the whatever. But you take responsibility for saying, "Well, here's the hammer, Matt, but you're still going to have to hammer the nail in yourself. I'm not doing it for you."
Yeah.
Or, here's the car. Like, which way do we want to go? Well, like, our job is actually to help the person design the best route for them at that moment in time. And a big
that's
part
what gives them the freedom. That's an interesting point as well, because what we were talking about earlier, Dax, is it kind of stems with that, doesn't it? With threat is. Maybe one of the reasons we're so wired at the moment as a society, and it's because a lot of our freedoms have been taken away from us. We can't even go out of the house. We can't go to our work. We've got to stay at home. We've got to wear masks. Like all of these freedoms, can't get toilet rolls sometimes.
Our happiness is directly linked to the amount of freedom we sense present in our life at any given time, right? You start to remove freedoms, you start to reduce happiness. They're inextricably linked. And so, and that should be borne in mind by any coach. Like, even if your client is saying, just tell me what to do and I'll bloody well do it. That is true. Like, there are some clients who are ready for that. But what you'll nearly always find is that they're ready for that for a short period of time. 6, 8, 12 weeks, whatever, right? They'll go, well, I've got a wedding coming up. I'm willing to curtail some of my freedoms in order to feel really free on that particular day. Or like, I've worked with A-list actors and stuff, and they say they have to be a certain way by the time they start day one of filming. And they say, well, but you know what? Like, A, I'm going to be a big star. B, I'm going to get a big pay packet. I'm willing to curtail some of my freedoms in order to experience that freedom over there. Right? But most people aren't willing to curtail freedoms indefinitely. I mean, you can look at all the A-list actors who made their money as superheroes. They don't look like superheroes out of the superhero season films.
No.
Kind of Gerard Butler doesn't look like Leonidas year round, kind of Chris Evans doesn't look like Captain America year round. Like, none of them do. And so, we can give up certain freedoms for certain periods of time, but we won't give them up indefinitely.
The problem is, I suppose, Dax, is a lot of freedoms can be taken away from us. We often sometimes don't realize that it's happening. So whether it's a choice we make in our career, in our business, like certain freedoms slowly. I think this is probably some of the worries and concerns people have today with, people being, information being wiped out or platforms being deleted is that when slowly as freedoms get taken away, it can be a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, it can. And this is why, earlier on you asked me about AIR, attention, intention, repetition, and I was talking about my ritual. Like, so another part of my daily ritual is to look at, like, if you think of it this way, how do you know that you have freedoms, right? You know that you have freedoms by your ability to choose. Like, so choices equal freedom. How many choices do I have? So every day, and particularly, like, I do it every day anyway, but on days when I'm feeling like a little bit down or a little bit dark or whatever, like we all do, are one of the kind of core parts of the ritual are to look at the choices I have available to me. Right? When you look at your choices before you look at your restriction and limitations, you end up in a better place. You go, what could I do? I could do this. I could do it. And you may actually end up just to choose, sit on the couch all day, stay in your pajamas and watch telly. But once you realize that you're doing it as a choice rather than, like there's nothing else for me to do. When you approach life like there's nothing else for you to do, that there's nothing else that you can do, it feels like that you don't have any freedom. And that's what makes you unhappy. But when you say, here's a million things I could do today, and I'm still choosing to be in now I'm choosing to say, do you know what? Like there are days I've been excited to stay in my pajamas all day, lay on the sofa and just Netflix binge and go, but it feels like a choice. It feels really good. There are other days where I've actually just done that out of a kind of default mindset. And at the end of the day, I'm really pissed off with myself and I'm really unhappy. And I'm like, oh, that was a bloody waste of a day. It was exactly.
When does that start, Dax? When do we start to kind of just conform to our behaviors rather than have the autonomy to think for ourselves and get basically what you're talking about there is getting attention on what are my choices, right? That's one of the A in air. Yeah. But what quite often we can conform to just our patterns of behavior, and then we start to feel like we haven't got any choices, and I can't quit this job because I've got this mortgage to pay for, I've got these bills to pay for, I can't get out of this relationship because of X, Y, Z, and we start our mammalian brain, reptilian brain kicks off. When does that all kick off? When does that start?
It starts when we start living mindlessly, when we don't actually ask ourselves meaningful questions on a daily basis. And the most meaningful questions we can ask ourselves are identity questions. Who do I want to be? How do I want to experience myself today? By the time my head hits the pillow tonight, what do I want to be able to say about myself? Right? Kind of that, if you start every day deciding...
Know yourself to grow yourself.
Yeah. The Guru Project, it even goes further than that. It says, know yourself, grow yourself, show yourself, right? And that show yourself element is really important because actually it's reflecting a lot of personal trainers' businesses. The content that they're not writing that they really want to write, but they're too scared in case people judge them. It's because they haven't grown in a certain way. And if you haven't grown in a certain way, it's because you don't know yourself as well as you need to know yourself. Know yourself, grow yourself, show yourself, right? It follows that specific pathway.
I think having gone through that process, or probably to some extent still going through it, I think the worry or the challenge is, like you said, one thing I've grappled with is where is the bridge between doing what you said earlier on in this podcast, which was showing up as your authentic self, creating the content or creating the business that you want to create, like doing the stuff that you're passionate about. But then at the other end, all of the marketing books, the gurus tell us you've got to nail down your avatar, you've got to shoot for this specific person, and they've got to have these character traits, and it's like where do those two meet? And obviously that where they meet is the magic. But I think, but also there's a market, and there's a thirsty market for maybe weight loss or for making more money, and whatever your market is. But how do trainers like myself or coaches watching this, how do they find that middle, that magic middle?
So in the Guru Project, I teach people to, put yourself at the center of the universe. So one thing I'm not going to say here is that any of those people that teach that stuff are wrong, right? That you do need the thirsty crowd to a degree. You do need to identify a tight avatar and all the rest of it. Now, where I differ in my approach to those people is that they normally have you start there. They have you start by mind reading. This is how I see it, particularly with my mind map basis. They have you start by trying to mind read strangers. I don't know these people. I've never really met them, but now I'm going to go, who are they? What do they want? What might they want? What price might they be willing to pay? What's their pain? How do I, right? So we start with the uncertain, and then we try and slot ourselves into that. To go, well, what I really love is performance training and all this kind of stuff. But basically, they tell me that the money is in weight loss and rapid weight loss transformation. And so I'm going to subdue and suppress the parts of me that what I really want to do, so I can go and work with these guys over here. And eventually you'll burn out from it, because every day you'll wake up doing what you don't want to do with people you don't want to do it with in ways that you don't want to do it, right? So what I say is you start with yourself. Like, what are your deepest identifiers, like, about who you want to be, how you want to show up, the impact that you want to make in the world, right? So on the Guru Project, we start with the messenger, that's us. Then we develop the message. Then we start to look at what our magic is, like what are the unique set of attributes that only you show up in the world with, that no one else does. And there, you do have those attributes. My magic is simplicity, story, and systems. If I just lean into those three things, if everything I create is a story that makes something simple and that offers you a peek at a system, I sell whatever I want, whenever I want, basically. If I try and do it like the way some of the marketers tell me, oh, write articles like this, they all fall flat. No one pays attention to them. I just have to sound the same as everyone else. So you got the messenger, the message, the magic. Then you've got the money comes next. Like, how much do I want to earn? Right? And when I say money, for me, money isn't just cash. Money is all the ways you want to be paid. We all put cash as the first payment. But how do you want to be paid? Like, I want to be paid with a lot of time off, or the ability to go traveling whenever I feel like it, to go take these massive adventures. I was talking to you about being at Everest and stuff like that. All of these things, all the ways you want to be paid are important, not just money.
Yeah.
Once you know what the money is, then you say, okay, so what does the model have to be? Right? So I know who I am, what I do, how I do it to best effect, right? Where my greatest level of skill and passion and everything else combined. I know how much I want to earn. Now let me go and see what it is that I want to offer to the world off the back of that. So what's my model? And is it going to be online, offline? Is it going to be group? Is it going to be single? Is it going to be, kind of high intensive? Is it going to be long duration? Like, all of these different aspects. What's my product suite going to look like? Once you know that, then you say, okay, so who are my market? Who are these people that would buy this? And then after that, you say, well, what's the marketing that I need to create to speak to those people? And most people go the other way around. Where's the thirsty crowd? What messages are they listening to already? Let me jump into that conversation and let me try and drag them back to my business and see if they want to come play with me. Now, the trouble is 99.9% of all the market are being hit by the same messages, and 99.9% of trainers and coaches are doing the Monday meme, the Tuesday thought, the Wednesday workout, the Thursday tip. That, like, everybody's putting the same content out. I call it arse, abs, and avocado. Kind of at some point during your month's content, you're going to put something out to do with kind of toning up your arse. Another one's going to be to do with your abs. Another one's going to be to do with avocado, greens, drinks, vitamins, something nutritional, right?
Yeah.
That's when I very, very, very first got into personal training, and I was a really early adopter to the internet. I was one of the first UK personal trainers with a website. When I first got into that, we're talking 22 years ago now, right? When I first got into that, arse, abs, and avocado, because people hadn't seen it, they were like, yeah,
that's huge.
Man, thanks. Right? Now, you're just one of millions who are putting the same content out.
Yeah.
To the same people. So you're all kind of, you're all vying for the same people with essentially the same message. What very few people are doing is saying, my job isn't to go out and get people to get clients. My job, and I think of it like a pathway. You become your dream self in order to create. It doesn't mean perfect. It means in alignment with your values and your beliefs and your passions and your purpose and your ideologies. You start to live out of that dream self. When you live out your dream self, you create the dream products, because you're only making things that you are super passionate and purposeful about.
That's the key, isn't it, Dax? Because like what you were saying a minute ago is, there are companies that make an absolute fortune selling abs and avocado and fitness workouts and all that. But for the guys like myself and you, coaches, that can be really draining, and their shelf life in that could be really low. I mean, in some cases they may have massive investors and loads of money into it and whatever, but ultimately they're going to burn out. And they're not. That they may even depends what you're classing as success. They may become very wealthy from it, but they're actually not very happy. And then you have to answer the question, well, what do I want? Do I want to be extremely wealthy, or do I want to do a career that's meaningful and I get something back from? And that's where I suppose it comes with, how do you want to get paid?
How you want to be? It's one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves. Because what I've actually found is that yeah, money's nice. I love it. Like if I could have a big vault and go surfing through it like Scrooge McDuck, that'd be awesome. Right? But money's only part of the equation. If you're earning all the money, but you're not ever having time off, and you're terrified to leave your business, and you've got your phone with you even when you're on the beach with your family, when you do finally take a vacation, and you're answering client messages and all that kind of stuff, is that really how you saw success looking for you? Most people don't really have a clear idea of what success looks like. It's very vague, right? So I say be the dream self. The dream self will create the dream products. The dream products will attract the dream clients. And the dream clients, when you're working with enough of those, they will create your dream life for you, because your dream clients will understand that you take a vacation like in our family, we had the 12-week rule. It was just even when I still had the studio, every 12 weeks, we'd take a minimum of a 2-week vacation somewhere, every 12 weeks. And that mean that the clients weren't getting trained from me in that 2-week period, but they knew that when they became clients. And because they were my dream clients, as opposed to any person with a wallet and a pulse, they were my dream clients. They valued that in me. They were like, oh yeah, great. Where are you going this time? Tell us about your adventures.
Yeah, because you're living by the coaching principles that you teach as well.
Right.
Freedom.
And so using what I've just said there, right, that kind of, you go the messenger, the message, the magic, the money, the model, the market, the marketing, you do it in that order. I've been able to build multiple 6-figure income out of actual personal training, like one-to-one training. I've been able to build 6-figure incomes out of online training. I've been able to build 6-figure incomes out of retreats. I've been able to build 6-figure incomes out of online programs and that kind of stuff. 6-figure incomes out of workshops and lectures. 6-figure incomes out of kind of more detailed courses like MindMap. MindMap now is like a year-long diploma program that I run right online. Right, 6-figure incomes out of that. Like, that doesn't happen by accident, right? And so one of the things that I'm often saying to people, where it's my favorite little ditty to kind of remind people: methods are many, principles but few. Methods are often changing, principles never do. When you build out principles, you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every 5 minutes. When you build your business out of methods, you're constantly going, well, is there a better method? Do I need to change this? And this new guy is saying to stop doing these kind of posts and start doing that. And you're constantly working in methodology.
Yeah.
What I try to encourage people to do, whether that be from the business side, whether that be the actual coaching itself, is to find a core key set of principles that work again and again and again and again, and keep applying them until you become a master of them. Don't keep changing yourself in order to fit the environment, right? Kind of just make sure that keep growing and evolving yourself, but don't keep changing yourself every 5 minutes. Be who you're going to be, and then say, let me make sure that my environment supports who I most want to be. And most people are kind of saying, let me go and find what the environment wants me to be, and I'll go and be that for a while. And they're this chameleon-like person who never really masters anything, who never quite crosses the finish line with anything, who never quite makes the impact or generates the influence or makes the kind of income that they ever really want to make. They make it really hard on themselves. Again, just that being the center of your own universe is exactly what we're talking about here.
I'm just being very aware of your time now, Dax. You've been very generous with it.
Good. A, it's lockdown, and B, I'm working from home. So you're
Well, I mean, just on that, just the last little bit on that, with the world that we live in now, with everything going on and the craziness, what do you think is the sort of future of personal training, gyms? What with all the technology on its way, have you got like a bit of a Dax inside vision to what to expect over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think this we're going to be feeling the impact of this for probably 5 to 10 years. The coronavirus thing. even once this is all over, think about how strongly people have been indoctrinated into socially distancing, into kind of, you know, like a big part of what made me and my personal training studio so successful. We were really hands-on. We coupled like physical therapy and manual stretching and PNF and all kinds of stuff alongside of the actual physical training, right? And that was no one at the time when we were doing it. No one else was doing that. No, like the most you'd get with someone would stretch out your hamstrings at the end of a workout kind of thing. And we combined all of that. And now, like most people aren't making physical contact. The coaches aren't even properly spotting people anymore, or touching lats when they're doing lat pull downs or beating or anything, right? And so what we used to say about our company was that we really put the personal into personal training at the time, right? And one of the things I think you're going to notice is that even with the people that are attending live sessions, that sense of personal is going to be diminishing, because physical contact is actually quite an important part of our work in terms of differentiating us from being an instructor. So if you think about when you were a class instructor, you didn't go around manually palpating everyone and touching everyone, right? You'd run the class, you'd lead the class. People would like you and stuff. But the relationships you build with your personal trainer are very different to when you were an instructor. And some of that was down to like the intimacy of physical contact, of touching people palpating them when they're doing certain things, being in personal space, all of that kind of thing, right? It actually adds to that sense of closeness. And that sense of closeness adds to the sense of value that a personal trainer is bringing. Like kind of that real sense of intimacy and value. Increases income, basically, if you want to put it that way. And so we're going to see, I think, personal trainers having a much harder time being able to justify some of their rates when essentially to their clients, they're looking a lot more like they're performing an instructor's role rather than an intimate trainer's role. I think that's going to be kind of something to really look out for. And I think that's going to be a real challenge. The other part is that because there's been so much threat, because there's been so much, this was true when I built MindMap. I think it's going to be doubly so, 10 times so true now, is that coaches and trainers are going to have to become a lot better at understanding the big picture of their clients' lives and not the small picture of, with some trainers have a tendency to almost think that the client's life should revolve around them, the gym sessions, the nutrition, without bearing in mind that person has a very busy job, a stressful career, a family that, some of whom might be sick, some of whom might have even died during Corona, right? Kind of any number of things like that are going to become extremely stressful, extremely threatening, extremely challenging. And I think the best coaches, the ones who are going to not only maintain their businesses moving forward, but grow them and evolve with them, are going to be the ones who can actually bring a lot more of this coaching-centric, if you want to call it mindset, but kind of this, it goes beyond that, into the kind of the more neuroscience-y kind of basis of helping people to understand what's going on with them. I think they're going to be the ones that are really successful.
Well, you probably know the figures better than me, but I mean, all we keep hearing now is the rise of mental health problems. With all different types of mental health issues, and like you say, that I personally am seeing that a lot more with the people coming to us. It's less about the weight loss. That's a side effect that even they understand that now, that they know a lot of people that come to our facility now, that they know that they will lose weight if they just focus on improving themselves as a whole, rather than what it was like 10, 15 years ago, where it was almost a bit of a joke. Oh, I've got a few pounds to lose. I've been eating a few too many burgers. Now it's almost brought attention actually to the fact that there is more to life and in health than just going to the gym or just eating a clean meal. It is a mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, approach. Maybe hopefully that's one of the. You said earlier in the podcast that there's going to be some positives to come out of this. Hopefully, maybe that's one of them.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that people get a better understanding that we're a lot more complex than just the machinery of our bodies. You know, it's and personal trainers for the longest time have spent a lot of time trying to make the machinery better. Or what we now need to do, you know, it's a bit, another analogy I often use is about going upstream, right? Kind of, if you look at the downstream effect, let's just use, because it's the most common one for personal trainers, might be weight loss, right? And so we'll go upstream to a degree. We'll go, okay, we'll go to the first upstream point, which is that their training's off. The second upstream point, that their nutrition's off, right? But way upstream is the real cause, which is you know, it's kind of getting to the core of the question, which is most people, it's not that they don't know what to do. Like most of your clients won't say, I don't know what to do. Most of our overweight clients, historically with my personal training studio at the time, they knew diet and nutrition better than we did. I mean, they'd tried every variant of it, right? So you don't really have a client coming to you saying, I don't know what to do. What they're saying is, I know what to do, I just can't seem to get myself to do it consistently. And so what they're telling you then is it's not a workout issue and it's not a nutrition issue. It's something else. And it's not necessarily even purely a mindset issue. It's not a kind of, oh, they can't get motivated or any of those kind of things. It's maybe they can get motivated, they can't stay there. So what's upstream from mindset, brain's there. It's what's going on at a brain level that is causing them to not think in the way they need to think, to do the things they need to do to have the results they want to have. And until we start asking those questions, until we go upstream far enough, what we're always going to be doing, it's going to be a bit like the mechanic who has to keep kind of patching up the tire of the driver who has nails strewn all over his driveway, right? Kind of instead of going and picking up the nails off the driveway, he just drives to his garage every day with a flat tire and says, can you fix it? I mean, in many respects, what a lot of personal trainers are often trying to do is they're trying to take care of the downstream stuff. Let's tart up your nutrition plan a little bit more. Let's tart up your training plan a little bit more, and let's hold you a bit more accountable, without realizing that sometimes it's the very accountability itself that's causing the threat, right? Because sometimes when we hold people accountable, what we're really doing is making them feel judged, making them feel that kind of they're being criticized. Now they want to run away again, and they're back to square one. One of the things I really wish trainers had gotten better at, and I think they've gotten better from when I first started, but they're still not quite there yet, is I wish that they would understand that the very reason that they're in the client's lives is because the clients are struggling to do the things that they themselves are telling the clients to do, right? Like, if the client were already really good at staying on their nutrition plan, if they're already really good at staying on their movement or exercise plan, there'd be no need for a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And so if all we keep doing is interceding by saying, okay, well, let's get you back on the nutrition plan, let's get you back on the training plan, then we're not really adding very much input into solving the problem.
Yeah.
If we could actually get ourselves to understand that really what we need to do is go so far upstream that the client actually understands themselves better than they've ever understood themselves, then they'll start just like me with the PTSD stuff, they'll start spontaneously making the right decisions because they'll be more aware of where the decision's going wrong. Most people we're only ever seeing the effect. We're never really getting to the cause.
Yeah. On just one last thing on that, because I have this kind of feeling that we have, as PTs or personal trainers, which is a label that almost kind of devalues us to some extent because of what people's ideas of that is. But I kind of feel like because we can hopefully nip things in the bud a lot, you know, if we're being as effective as we can as all-round coaches. Do you sort of foresee at some point there being a bit of a bridge between whether you call it personal training or whatever, transformation coaching, into healthcare, like healthcare, and that under their predictions that the National Health Service could go bankrupt or just completely collapse eventually. I mean, hopefully that'll never happen, but it seems to me like there's not enough attention on actually what's causing a lot of these issues in the first place, and how can we, like you talking about upstream and downstream, how can we get things before they're falling off the damn river, you know? And
part of that, I think, Matt, is actually stop talking about arse, abs and avocado and start talking to people about what really matters. Like, the first thing we have to do is get their attention, right? Like people have to hear a story that's different to the one they've been hearing, and hear it with, it's using AR, get their attention, share a different intention for them. Like the intention is not just to make, to get rid of the body fat or excess weight that you're carrying, but the intention is to have you at the point where actually you don't need to ever worry about this ever again, because you're going to have control over your life. You're going to have choices to make. You're going to have more of the ability to influence your own life in more positive ways, and then repeat that over and over again. And even what I've seen very often, even those coaches who do have a little bit of this under their belt and are saying it, they're probably doing about 20% of this kind of stuff, and then 80% arse, abs, and avocado, which basically is what they're saying is this is a more attractive message. And the more you keep sharing that one, the more people are going to believe that all I need is someone to tell me what to eat and how to move.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely given me another kick up the backside to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can be on the. Just a quick fire finish then. What's your favorite book of all time and why?
Conversations with God, without a doubt. It came to me at a time when I really needed, when I was in the depths of the PTSD stuff. I'm not religious, but if I were religious, I'd probably be Buddhist. Most of my belief systems align with Buddhism. But Conversation with God by Neale Donald Walsch, I was really resistant to it the first couple of times. I just thought it was bullshit. I actually threw the book across the room. I hated it. Eventually got myself back to reading it, read through it, and it's been the most life-changing thing I've ever read. It's like self-coaching, essentially. Some of the things that come up in that book, like Neale Donald Walsch is ostensibly having. Neil says he actually had a conversation with God. Whether you believe him or not, whether you believe God exists or not, is irrelevant. The conversation itself has immense value. Just so happened, I went on to actually work with Neale Donald Walsch as well. He became my mentor for a while, so I actually did a mentorship program with him and did some extra coaching and all that. That was fantastic. But without a doubt, and I've read the entire series. There's about 9 or 10 books, and I actually reread all of them again every year. So I read that, and I have done for the last 15 years.
I didn't know that. There's 10 books.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That you might have answered my second quick-fire question, which was who's been your most impactful mentor or coach? Is it Neil?
Neil's certainly been one of them. Certainly down that route. I've worked with lots of different people for lots of different reasons. But Neale Donald Walsch would definitely be up there. I've also worked with Bob Proctor from The Secret, Joe Vitale from The Secret as well. And so even though I'm not tightly aligned with law of attraction stuff in that kind of way, they were what they taught me, and kind of the lessons I took from them were very, very valuable. I've worked with a lot of different people in various aspects of marketing and stuff like that. Kevin Nations would be a great one. It's very, very high level sales coach, but somebody who teaches you how to do it in a very integrated and very personal way. So he's been fantastic. There's too many to mention, but
yeah, okay.
We'll get there.
Biggest myth to building a coaching business? We probably may have covered that already, but if you...
Yeah, we probably have. I think the biggest myth is that you have to go find the thirsty crowd. Truth is, there's different ways of looking at it. I think that our job is to light a bonfire in ourselves and burn so brightly that we attract all the people in the dark to come walking toward us. Because we can spend our life walking around in the darkness for these pinpricks of light for the various people that we're trying to snap into our thing. But if you light a fire under yourself and you burn so brightly and that people just see you and hear you as somebody who's authentic, truly not just believes in what they're talking about, but shares the stories of what they're talking about in a way that is deep, resonant, and that actually speaks of their experience, then you're going to attract all the people that you want.
Biggest challenge in your career you've overcome?
Probably the PTSD was the biggest challenge, because it had the biggest impact upon me in terms of business-wise. I ended up closing my business financially at the time. It just so happened, though, kind of the very first year that I launched the MindMap online program. I mean, that was one of, at that time, it was the very best single launch of any product I've ever done. So kind of that made over £250,000 with no Facebook ads or anything.
Wow.
just in that first intake. So that was probably one of the best. No, it was the very best single launch of anything I've ever done in my life. So crisis, right? Kind of challenge and opportunity.
Your biggest secret to being such a prolific writer. I remember one time I was just like, is this guy on some sort of drug? Your content was just insane. How is he doing this? How is he doing running his gyms and doing these courses, and then he's got this time to write these, like, you probably can remember these like long posts.
Right? Yeah.
How was that possible?
Biggest secret is a not so secret. It's one, I'm a prolific reader, so I think that makes it much easier for me to write. So because I read so much, my brain has lots of things to think about and talk about. And second is writing for me. I don't write for you, and so if I'm writing for me, it's easy. If I'm writing for you, it makes it hard. Oh, I wonder if I've said that in the right way. I wonder if today's the right day I should be putting this out, because there's so much going on in the world about this stuff at the moment. And you start to second guess yourself. And one of the things I learned ages ago off Joe Vitale, actually, Joe Vitale said that you can either, basically in any given situation, you can either wear the editor's hat or the author's hat, but you can't wear the author's hat and the editor's hat at the same time. And very often the distinction being the author is normally writing for themselves, right? It's a work of joy and a work of pleasure, and what do I feel really inspired by? The editor is always thinking about what the reader's going to think. Let's change that word there. Let's move that bit around there. That sentence structure is not quite right. And basically your creativity disappears when you become the editor.
Yeah. I love that.
I essentially write for myself. I don't write for you. Just but once I publish, I'm always hoping that what I'm writing for myself is going to prove of value for you. But if I write for myself, I'm prolific. If I write for you, I'm like, I have to really sit down and think my way through this.
Yeah, actually, you reminded me. I remember listening to Tim Ferriss interview Maria Popova. I think she's got a blog called Brain Pickings. I think it's got a ridiculous amount of millions of people reading it, and he asked her the same question, what's your secret? And she said, I write for myself. And that was actually how her blog started. Is she just sent an email to a friend about, it's what I'm thinking. They were like, wow, that was amazing. And then she sent it to another one. They said, yeah, I really enjoyed that. And
blogging just started out as personal journaling, right? It's just that you decided to pop your personal journal up online. But, over time, we've all learned to be, air quotes, copywriters and all the rest of it. And that's some of the worst things that you can do is learn to write copy, because when you learn to write copy, you're learning from people who are teaching hundreds of thousands of other people how to write copy, and you suddenly become vanilla. You become the same as everyone else. You want your nuanced language in there. You want your kind of weird mannerisms and weird analogies and kind of using too many exclamation marks or using all caps, or you want you to be on paper, not something that someone has. You're not writing for your English teacher, to say, you've used the wrong grammatical kind of sequencing in this place or the wrong syntax. Fuck them.
Yeah.
Right for you.
What do you most want to be remembered for, Dax?
I most want to be remembered for helping people to not just remember, but truly understand and embrace one simple idea, is that you don't have to be more than you are right now in life to be happy, successful, and free. But that if that's ever really going to be true for you, that you have to start showing up as all that you are: the happy, the sad, the silly, the funny, the serious, the geek, the nerd, the everything. And that the more you can step into being all that you are, all of those other things are going to come together for you. Most of us are living very one-dimensional lives where we're showing people this tiny snippet, this tiny sliver of who we are. And we're hoping that tiny sliver is enough to persuade people that we're people of value, that we're people of worth, that we're people of merit. And because we're only ever living out a tiny sliver of our lives, and we're keeping so much of our life secret, it's almost like we're living in a form of doubt-induced shame. Like, I don't want people to know all this about me. I don't want people to see all these bits about me. Everyone knows me as a successful businessman, therefore I can only ever talk about these things. And you don't have to be more than you are. We don't have to spend our life searching. Like, how can I go and become better at something, or how do I make myself appear better at something? You don't have to do that. Just be all that you are. The happy, the sad, the silly, the goofy, the like everything. Just go and be it. And once you start being it, you won't spend your life doubting yourself anymore. You might doubt some of your actions from time to time, but you won't doubt yourself. You just say, no, this is me.
What do you say to the people who sort of lack the courage to do that, to push themselves out of the comfort zone and allow themselves to just be them, and for all the warts and all?
Yeah. So the word courage, it comes from the Latin courage, right? It kind of speaking from your heart, really, right? That's really what it means. Cor is heart. And so start speaking from your heart a bit more, right? But that doesn't answer your question, but start speaking from your heart first off to the people that you do already trust and bond with and connect with, and start speaking more to those people. Because what I've found with most of my really high level clients, the ones that pay me 50 grand a year plus to work with, is that most of them are struggling still in life in the same way as all of us are. And they're struggling with only showing up in their marriages and their relationships and their friendships and everything else as part people. They've only ever shown their partner a part of them. Start where you feel safe. Like, okay, this is the husband that I've been for this time, but there is this other side to me, and there's this. Maybe you're a goofy husband, but maybe there's a more serious side to you, or a deeper side, or a spiritual side, or something that you've kind of kept to yourself, but you don't share with your partner. So we'll start sharing that, and then start sharing it with your kids. Like, I cry at soppy movies. I write and read poetry. I write a lot of poetry, in fact, and I share it. I write stories and parables, and but I'm also this tufty ex-soldier, likes combat sports and all that kind of stuff. I'm like everybody. I'm a very complex person, and I'm not always the, people see a lot of my content online and it might seem very intellectual and very spiritual and but I tell the rudest, dirtiest jokes. I've got a really disgusting sense of humor, right? Like, I'm all of these things. And if I don't feel courageous enough yet to share it with everyone, then find the one person you will. Let me see the other part. And then turn that into 2 people, and then turn that into 3. And
you just reminded me, I think, I remember some of the stuff you say, and it's one of those quotes that stuck in my mind. I think it was one of your dates with Dax. I don't know if I'm butchering it, but it was something like the biggest depression is the suppression of self-expression.
Yeah, that's it.
And I was like, bing!
Suppression always leads to depression eventually, right? Because basically,
what are you suppressing that is getting you down,
right? And so, because when you think about it, so what suppression is at its heart is a form of shame. It's a kind of saying, I'm not good enough, so I don't want people to see this about me. Anytime you suppress, what you're really saying is there's something about you that you're ashamed about. That if they saw this about me, they might think differently of me. And I don't want them to think differently, so I won't show them. And so I completely understand. Like that, it's baby steps. It's not go from 0 to 100. Like, go take all your deepest, darkest secrets and then go online and start writing posts about it tomorrow. Right? That's a big jump, and it's terrifying. But kind of start having conversations with the people that you trust and love the most in life, and let them start to see. And once you realize that your family still love you, or those people still love you, you go, oh, you know what, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I can. I won't go into the full depths of it, but I'll share a little bit of that with some people who don't know me quite so well.
Yeah.
We don't always have to take the big, it's over the mountain, round the mountain, right? You don't have to go, today I'm going to write a post about my deepest, darkest secrets and shame and all these things that I found. Like, or even if it's not that, well, today I'm going to write a post really telling an off-color joke that I'm a bit worried that other people like it. You don't have to dive in like that, and shame on anyone who's made you feel that you do that. Like you either have to go 100% or not bother at all. Like 1% improvement on where you are today is still 1% improvement.
Yeah, and it's probably a great way to finish, because it massively interlinks with what you were saying earlier about the link between freedom and happiness. And you know, I mean, I've had a few members on our podcast who have overcome addictions, like, you know, gambling and things like this, and you know, to actually come on a podcast and tell their story from something that they were bottling for 25 years, you know, and the freedom, the sense of freedom of, you know, being able to let the shoulders down after that, and that's the same thing. Like you've experienced it. I've always been really, you know, admirable of yourself and people like Paul Mort as well. Is, you know, just the complete guts just to kind of just say how you feel, and you know, and in recent years I've felt a lot more comfortable in doing it myself. And you do just feel a sense of like happiness. Your happiness increases because you feel like, you know, you can share if you've had a bad day, if you're going through a bad time. But equally, if you're not suppressing those feelings, that sense of freedom just to kind of just be you is pretty awesome, isn't it? If
you changed your job description or the kind of the actual nuts and bolts of it, and you actually said, do you know what? Like what I do is a personal trainer, or what I do is a coach, but my real job on a day in, day out basis is to become someone that I admire, respect, care for, and love. That's my job, is to become that person, right? Everything would start to change for you. Everything. And be on the lookout then for all the things that you're not admiring, not respecting, not caring for, not loving, and just start to address them tiny bit by tiny. You don't have to rip the band-aid off all in one go. Just like, you know, if you're the big soppy ass like me that cries at certain soppy movies and 4 weddings and a funeral and all kinds of stuff, and you go, well, but you're a big roughy tufty ex-commando dude, you're not supposed to do that, and start to just lean into it and turn to your missus when you're watching the movie and go, God, that one brought a tear to me. Just start having conversations. We don't have to rip the band-aid off. We never have to do that. Because one of the biggest sources of pain for people is the idea that they have to be perfect. Yeah. And what I want to invite people to do is recognize that instead of searching for perfection, search for excellence. The word excellence means to surpass and go beyond. Just every day find the tiniest way to surpass and go beyond the version of you that showed up yesterday. Tiniest way. One tiny bit more of a conversation that you haven't had before. One book that you've not read, or one difficult thing that you've been avoiding. One commitment that you've been breaking that today you don't know what you're going to be like tomorrow, but you're going to keep the commitment today. Just find a way to excel, to surpass and go beyond yesterday's version of you. And also at the same time, don't give yourself shit on the days that you don't. Just go.
Yeah. Oh, we are. That's the worst thing that we do, isn't it? Is beat ourselves up.
Right. But just try to learn from it. Like, and that's when on the days where I don't excel, on the days where I've dropped the ball, I don't give myself shit about it. I try and sit down and I ask myself a bunch of questions about what led me to dropping that ball today. Like, how can I avoid this tomorrow? If I were advising a client on this, and they were looking in on my life, what would they have seen that maybe I'm not seeing? And we'll start from there.
Dax, I don't think I can finish it any better than that, man. It's been amazing. I think we're probably close to 2 hours. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. So thank you. And if people want to find out more about you or read your stuff, and where's the best place to follow Dax?
You can find me on Facebook. But I don't do a lot of public posts anymore, or nowhere near as much as I used to. So I tend to prefer to be in my tribe now. So I've got a Facebook tribe called the Enlightened Coach, where you can find me there. Yeah. But I also have an off Facebook group that I'm hosting on Mighty Network. So it's the Enlightened Coach. I'll send you the link.
Send me the link and I'll add it into the show notes.
But also mindmapcoach.com as well is where you can find out more about some of the stuff we've been speaking about. So there's a few places, but I'll send you the links.
Have I not asked you a question I should have asked you, Dax?
No, I think we covered a lot. I can't actually think of any questions you should have asked me, but we did cover a lot of ground. And yeah, thanks for having me on. And just, you know, whenever someone gives me the opportunity to have one of my mad ramblings and just shoot the shit for a while and just kind of talk about life, the universe, and everything, I'm always really, really grateful. I'm very grateful for your audience listening to this as well, because you put up with 2 hours of me.
Yeah, no, well, this is ticked off a box that I had, you know, that I wanted to tick off this year. So it's been amazing. So
we've been talking for a while. Like, I was in daylight when we started, and now it's like, you know, this little face in the thing. I'm all dressed in black.
Okay, thanks again, Dax, and we'll catch up soon.
No worries.